Hi everybody, this is Delene with McDonald's Sewing and Vacuum, and I'm really excited to welcome you to our second ever live stream of a class. This one I actually have some great help from Kurt Legleiter of Legleiter, what is this, Studios?
Legleiter
Video in Arc City. They do some really great work, and he's going to be a great help to us today. So we're going to make today the Sew and Style thread catcher. And this has been one of the most popular classes we've ever done. I personally have probably 4 or 5 of these. I have one at home on my chair for my handwork. I have one on my ironing board with my sewing machine, on my cutting table. So, and I have one at the store that I use for my long arm quilting, and it goes on and on and on. Once you've made one, you'll probably find yourself making a bunch of them. And the first one takes a little while to make, but it's really not that hard. There are just a lot of steps. So all of you hopefully received your kit with all the supplies. There are 2 extra things you might think about. We're going to take a break for lunch of about 30 minutes today. And probably during that time, if you could find a funnel, or if you don't have one, create one. You're going to want a little, I made one out of a piece of paper and some masking tape. You're going to want a little funnel of some kind to fill the pin cushion when we get to that part. And then you may want some craft glue or a hot glue gun later, whatever you like to use to glue with. Okay, so I hope you're all ready to go. I have ironed all of my fabrics, but we're going to start at the very beginning with cutting. And this is the pattern. You should have gotten that along with your kit. On the first page, it's going to show you all the materials and supplies you need. These thread catcher kits that we sent you with the class are really, in my opinion, the best way to go. If you decide to make another one and would like a thread catcher kit, we have a few left, but to be honest with you, you can get them much more economically at the author's Etsy page. So this was made by Terry of Curry Bungalow. That's her business, and it's right here on the bottom of the pattern is her name. That's also the name of the Etsy business. So if you go to Etsy and search for Curry Bungalow, you can find those thread catcher kits. And as I said, it's a much more economical way to purchase them than purchasing them from us, because we pretty much have to increase the price in order to be able to carry them. So, okay, so just to our basic instructions, RST always means right sides together. All seams are going to be a 1/4 inch seam. So if you have a 1/4 inch foot or a way to set a 1/4 inch seam on your machine, you might want to get that set up. Terry is actually the name of the lady that wrote the pattern. Recommends that you use thread that matches your thread catcher fabrics, or at least goes with it, because we will be doing some top stitching and so on, and you might not, your thread will be showing in some places, so make sure you're using the color of thread that you want to show. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is cut the outer bag fabric and interfacing. Actually, our interfacing is already cut with the kit. That's the other nice thing about it, so we don't have to cut that. But from the outer bag fabric, whatever you're going to use for that, you're going to want to cut an 18 by 8 inch piece. So this is some really cute fabric that I got actually from Field to Fabric in Winfield. It's by Tula Pink. And guess what? It has sewing machines on it, and I thought that would be really neat for a thread catcher. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my 8 by 18 inch piece. I'm just going to cut with my rotary cutter, and I don't know if you haven't seen our rotary cutters. This is my absolute favorite rotary cutter. It's not inexpensive. It's actually relatively expensive. I'm just going to cut on the 18 inch mark first, but it is really easy to use, and you'll probably see me cut on either side of the mat throughout the day today. I'm a lefty, but I like to use the cutter on either side of the mat. So Next, I'm going to cut my 8-inch piece. So I'm going to line it up here. Doing this all in front of you I might be a little slower and more awkward than I usually am, but you'll get the idea. So we're going to cut, I've cut it 18 inches wide. Now I'm going to cut my 8-inch piece right there. And I got to get it lined up again. Actually, it's probably easier with this ruler. I've got an 8.5-inch wide ruler, so I'm just going to go with my 8-inch wide mark on the ruler. And here we go with the other hand. So that's one of the reasons that I really like these cutters. Anyway, I'll set the rest of this aside. Probably we'll use some of it later for the posy and maybe for the pincushion portion. So that should be an 8 by 8-inch piece, 8 by 18-inch piece right there. Now, as we're going along, we do have a chat available. So if you have a question, feel free to put the question in the chat. I might not see it right away because I'm not always going to be looking at my computer, but I will check it regularly. Or if you're having any problem, just you can also text me. I have my phone in my pocket and it should vibrate, so hopefully I'll see that. Okay, so there's my outer bag, and the next thing I need to cut is the lining piece, and this is actually bigger. Might be surprising, but it's bigger. It's 18 by 9. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut my 18-inch wide section. And you might need to straighten out your edges. You all know how to do that before you cut. But here's the 18 inches right here. Oh, my legs on my table just, there we go. Now maybe it won't collapse under me. Did I get that cut? Yeah. So I got a little distracted and didn't cut quite as tight or as hard as I might have. I'll just do it again. Okay. It's kind of hard to cut when your table falls out from under you. There, that should work better. Okay, so there's my 18-inch wide, and remember this time we're going to go 9 inches wide instead of 8. You probably already have yours cut, but if not, I'm going to try not to go too fast so that everybody can kind of keep up. Where's 9? It's right there. Okay, there's my 9-inch mark. And I'm going to cut that one and set that aside. Okay, and then we'll see what's next here. So you're going to also cut 2 pieces of the lining fabric, 7 by 4 inches wide, and this is going to cover your subway tile, which is what holds everything together here. So let's see if this is wide enough. I think it might be 4 inches wide, but the selvage is still on there, so we'll see. Nope, I'm going to need a different piece. Okay. So 7 by 4. So there's my 4 inches. Whoops. Get all my supplies out of the way. Okay. Just making sure, you know that whole thing they say about measure twice, cut once? I usually measure like 12 times, cut once, because yeah, we all know what happens when we don't. Okay, and then I want it to be 2 of them that are 7 inches wide, and fortunately this ruler is wide enough that I can use it for my 7-inch pieces too. Just making sure there's 7. Where is it? Where's my 7-inch mark? There it is. and another 7. Okay, so that's for the ceramic tile. We're going to cut one piece 5 by 2 3/4. So actually this other piece that had my salvage on it would probably work. So 5 inches by 2 3/4. I'm going to cut the 2 3/4. Might be a little wasteful this way, but the way my mat's set up, it's kind of easier. Okay, I've got 2 3/4 there. And that can go in my thread catcher. And I'm going to do another one that's 5 inches wide. So there, that is for the hanging tab. And that hanging tab will go in here and hold your scissors for you. Or whatever else you want to put in there. I've seen pens in there and pencils, and the staff put all kinds of stuff in theirs, depending on what they need. Okay, and then we need another piece. Oh wait, yeah, the hanging tab. Sorry, wrong thing. This is the hanging tab. It's the part that connects the thread catcher to the subway tile. The next one is going to be the scissor tab, and that's the one that gets used for all kinds of things. So I need one of those that's 2 by 2 1/4. So this was 2 3/4, if I remember right. I'm going to cut it down to 2 1/4. Again, you might do it a different way. I'm not really thinking about waste right now. I know a lot of you do, but I'm not going to take the time to think about that today. And I'm going to make a 2-inch wide cut here. And that's my scissor tab. Okay. Now we've got a contrasting strip trim. So I just went ahead and cut this when I decided what fabric I wanted. You'll want to cut that 18 inches by 1 7/8 inches wide. So that's what I did there. So that is ready to go. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to cut is the pieces for the pin cushion. Now, if you want to, you can make the pin cushion pieced this way, where we have different fabrics on it, or you could just cut a whole piece. I kind of like the pieced look, so that's what we're going to do today. But the fun thing about these is you can make all kinds of customizations if you want to. Okay, so to do all the different pieces, you're going to cut first for the pin cushion back. It's one solid piece. I would just say, if you want to have it be solid on both sides, just cut 2 pieces, 7 1/2 by 4 1/2. So I'm going to use still my lining fabric for this, and I want it 7 1/2. Just make sure, I'm pretty sure this is at least, yeah, it's 5 inches wide. So we're going to do 7 1/2 right there. That's 8. Let's do 7 1/2. Okay, 7 1/2 by 4. Wait a minute, 4 1/4. I think I said 4 1/2. I looked at a different place. So we're going to do 4 1/4 this direction on the width. Maybe make sure I've got it. Yeah, 7 1/2 by 4 1/4. And that's going to be the back of my pin cushion. Now I need 7 coordinating straps, 1 1/2 by 4 1/2. I ended up deciding that I liked it better when I had the lining fabric on each end. So I'm going to cut 2 of those for the ends of the pin cushion. So those need to be 1 1/2 by 4 1/2. And I probably this is one time when it would have been nice if I'd cut this at 4 1/2 all the way across, but I didn't. Okay, so now I will. And I'm going to cut 2 pieces 1 1/2 inches wide. So there's 1. And there's my second one. It's nice to get all the cutting that you can done ahead of time, because that way, for me, this is not one of my favorite things to do. So it kind of just gets it all out of the way, and then I can have fun. Okay, I'm going to keep those smaller pieces with my pincushion bottom. I'll probably just tape them or pin them together so I don't lose them. Now I probably will do something like this. I'm going to take 3 pieces of one other fabric that coordinates. And I think most of you know I drive a lime green car, so lime green's kind of a favorite color of mine. So I'm going to do a little bit here with I'm going to do those 3 strips with the lime green. And they need to be 4.5 inches wide. So I'm going to cut this whole strip 4.5 inches wide. And then 3 pieces 1.5 inches. Yeah, I remember things about that long too. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. Now, if you were one of those overachievers that cut everything before class, thanks for hanging out with us while I do mine. And let's see, I think with that, I don't know. I may change my fabric choices later. I do kind of want to use some more of this Tula Pink sewing fabric. Maybe that'll bring it all together. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces of this, and I'll just cut a strip 1.5 inches wide. And I also do want to say I'm sorry that we had to reschedule it to do it this way, but I'm hoping that you'll find that these video classes or online live classes will be kind of a neat way to do it, because you don't have to drag all your stuff out here to the store and down the basement steps. We don't have to do it for you. And I don't know, it's just kind of a nice, convenient way. Plus, you'll have the link to the video. It's going to stay up on YouTube. So the same link that you're using to participate here, you'll be able to go and review something if you forget how to do it, you want to make another one, or if you need help or you didn't quite follow. Sometimes I say something other than what I mean. Whatever comes out of my mouth sometimes is not what I am really talking about. I don't know if you know what I mean. Probably you've heard me do that before, so maybe it'll make sense a second time if I'm not real clear. Okay, the batting, if you got the kit, your batting is already cut, and you have 2 pieces of it. One's going to be slightly bigger than the other. And then the hook and loop tape, otherwise known to the rest of the world as Velcro. I think mine was stuck. Yeah, mine's stuck to my, whatever this stuff is, shelf liner. The shelf liner goes underneath. I didn't put any on this one, but I really do like it. I ended up gluing it on. It goes on the bottom of your ceramic tile, and it kind of keeps it from slipping off your table. So that's a really good, good thing to use too. So we don't need to cut the hook and loop tape either. I am going to cut fabric for the posy. The posy's the little flower that goes on top of your thread or your pincushion. And you can use this one. I used a completely different fabric for. Put a cute little button in the middle. You see lime green follows me wherever I go. A lot of you may know, some of you may know Ramona Dutton, who worked with us for a while. She made this one, and it has a little Tinkerbell button, and she used the Tinkerbell fabric on it for our kids' class. So you can do all kinds of fun things. I made one with some fabric I got in Las Vegas that had dice all over it, and I had a chip from Las Vegas that I set up in the in the posy. So there's all kinds of fun things you can do. And then on this one, I used the same color on both sides of the posy, but I've done different colors on the different sides. And I think for this one, I'm going to use 2 different colors of fabric. I'm going to use my main fabric and my lining fabric. So I need to cut 2 5.5-inch squares. So I'm going to do that next. At least if I have enough of my lining fabric, I will do that. Kurt's checking to make sure everything's going okay. Looks like we're good, no questions so far. Okay, and so I'm actually going to do a tiny bit of fussy cutting so that I can get the, probably doesn't matter because it's going to be all cut up, but I'm going to get most of the sewing machine on here. So make this 5.5 inches square, and there's my 5.5 inch. At least it'll have all those colors in it. And I think this one hopefully is 5.5 inches. If not, I'm going to have to use it. Nope, it's not. So I'm going to have to use a different color. Actually, you know what? I guess on this one I'm going to use the same color on both sides, which is fine. Okay, so 5.5 this way. And I'm not going to worry about fussy cutting this side. 5.5 this way. I probably could have been a little more careful about how I cut my outside fabric because I think the sewing machines won't be right down the center. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing that. But that'll be my posy, and it'll have some nice colors in it. Okay, and then the last thing to cut, if you don't have the kit, is your heat and bond, and that's what this is. And it'll go in between the 2 pieces of the posy. Okay, so I'm going to turn the page now. We're going to be on page 3 of the pattern, and we're ready to get started. So that's all the cutting for now. And I've made a mess of my fabric, but I'm just going to move these scraps out of the way. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is for assembling is we are going to start with the contrasting trim strip. So what you're going to do is fold it in half, wrong sides together, lengthwise, like that. And then press that. My iron's warming up again. So I'm going to wait for it to do that just a little bit. Okay. So press that in half. Okay, got that piece done. Now we're going to take the outer bag fabric like this, and we're going to put the trim on the top of the outer bag fabric. Let me see if I can move that out of my way so you can see. I'm going to layer this on top of the outer bag fabric, and then we are going to stitch. You're going to have the raw edges next to the top edge of the outer bag fabric, and you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam right along there. So actually you're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the folded left edge. So I'm glad I took a minute. I remember that. We're actually not going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. What we're going to do is sew a 1/4 inch from the folded edge. So, like that. Okay, I'm just going to make a little mark so I kind of know where that is. So we're going to just sew right along there. And I'm going to move over to the machine. I'm using today an Expression 710 machine. And I think what I'm going to do is actually flip this around so that I can use my 1/4 inch foot to line up with the folded edge and make sure I get that seam in the right place. I know that the first one of these I did, I put that seam, I just sewed a 1/4 inch seam, and that really didn't work later. So this is a good thing to catch. Okay, so when you're ready, you can just go ahead and sew that seam. I like to activate my needle down position on my machine so that when I stop, if I have to adjust things, the rest of my fabric doesn't move around on me. On this FOF, it also has a built-in walking foot, so I've got that walking foot engaged. It's a really nice feature. You don't necessarily need a walking foot to do this, but anytime there's a longer piece of fabric, a couple of longer pieces of fabric that you're sewing together, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you get to the end of it, sometimes, even though they were exactly the same length when you started, the one on top might be a little bit shorter than the one on the bottom, or vice versa. I think the one on the bottom might be shorter, actually. And it's because the feed dogs, if you don't have that walking foot on top, the feed dogs pull through on the bottom, and sometimes they pull through that fabric through a little bit faster, or on the bottom than on the top. So that's what it should look like when you're done. Notice mine's not perfectly straight, and that's okay. Nobody's going to ever know. All right. So once that's done, I'm going to come back over here to my instructions, and I'm going to place the lining fabric on top of the outer bag with right sides together. Am I right? Am I right? Let me skip back. Sorry, I skipped something. No, I did it. I didn't. Okay, just making sure I didn't skip something. Okay. It says interfacing, so I'm thinking maybe I should have... Oh, yes. Sorry, everybody. Should have sewed that down to the interfacing. So I'm going to go back. If you didn't do that, I'll show you how to get this right. And I'm actually going to press my interfacing. I didn't realize it was so wrinkled, so we'll just get that a little bit straighter. And Terry says that she doesn't like to use fusible interfacing for this project because the results just don't look as good. And I think maybe, you know what I mean, it gets kind of wrinkly and doesn't look quite so nice when you put it all together. So I'm just going to go put my interfacing underneath and stitch along that line again. See, even those of us who've made them a bazillion times sometimes miss a step. And, you know, I'm trying to read the instructions as we go, so I'll try to slow down and get that done a little bit better. And my stitching's not lining up exactly. That's okay. If you want, you could even use a decorative stitch here. Sometimes people say to me, oh, I don't know, I never use the decorative stitches on my machine. Well, this would be a great place to use one. And if you have an embroidery machine and you have a cute embroidery design you want to use, you could use a plain piece of fabric and stitch an embroidery design on the front and before you cut it out. And that would make a really cute thread catcher too. All right, so now I have my interfacing on the back. And I'm going to come back over, and now we can put the lining fabric on top of that. And I'm going to flip it over with right sides together. And I'm going to have to read these instructions again. Sorry, I don't remember from time to time. So we're going to flip it to the other side, make sure that the lining and outer bag fabrics are lined up. The edges are lined up. Pin in place along the 18-inch side on which the trim is attached as shown. So actually I want to line it up like that. I just wanted to make sure that I got that right. Okay. So when they're lined up like this, you're going to pin in place the 18-inch side where the trim is stitched. So I've got my seam line I can see right there. And I'm just going to use some pins, a few, and pin this in place. So so I don't have to do as much adjusting as we go. Now I've got it pinned in place. And we're going to sew on top of the seam that we previously stitched. So that's going to be nicely stitched together, heavily stitched together. Shouldn't come apart, in other words. Okay, so, and now here is where I would actually, I'm going to grab one of these other thread catchers. Sorry, everybody. So I can put my pins here, so you can see why I like to have more than one. I don't have to move it back and forth between where the places, my stations where I'm working. Just stitching right along that line. And Viking, if you're using a Viking, Pfaff, or Singer machine, I will tell you that they strongly recommend that you do not stitch over pins. So I always stop. It's nice because my needle's down. I can just pull the pin out. It's not going to move anything. And put it in my thread catcher, in my pin cushion. Whoops. Yeah, you see I don't always sew straight. I have people say that to me, I don't sew straight, and I'm like, well, I don't either. But I don't really worry about it a whole lot unless I'm just, if I'm quilting, maybe piecing a quilt, maybe that's kind of important, but sometimes I don't really care about that either. Okay, so this is why your lining fabric is a little bit bigger than your outside fabric, is because this is going to end up folding. We're going to press it in a minute, and it's going to end up folding over to the back, so you've got a nice trim. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and press the lining fabric upwards. Maybe I should, you know, it's funny, I'm left-handed, but I can't seem to press with the left hand. I do some things with my right hand and some things with my left hand. So we're just going to press that lining fabric up and away from your contrasting strip. I'm thinking another color might have been better there, but what do you do? Okay, so I've got that, and the interfacing is still down underneath this part. So what we're going to do next is mark the center of the raw 18 inches here on both the lining and the outside of the fabric. So I know it's 18 inches wide, and I've got a nice little mat here where I can just line it up and find the 9-inch spot. And I'm going to mark that right there with my marking pencil. And I'm going to do that also on the lining fabric, which 9 is right. Yeah, it is a 9. Is right there. Okay. Now, with your right sides together, like this, we're going to match. Hang on, not like that. Back up, Deanie. With right sides together, we're going to match both ends of the trim stitch. So with the seam lines and the outer, let's see, I'm just going to read this so that it makes more sense. With the right sides together, match both ends of the trim strip seam lines, and the sides of the outer bag and lining fabrics. So what she's saying is we want to line this all up so it matches. I want to make sure that my fold for my lining matches up. I want to make sure that trim stitch or trim piece lines up and that my edges line up. And we are going to pin that in place as well. I just invested in these for the store. These pins are called quilting pins, but they have glass heads on them. So if you accidentally iron one, it won't melt. I think we probably have all done with that with the plastic ones too, so I really like it. And I don't know if you can see, my lining doesn't quite match up. I'm going to kind of scooch it over to make sure it matches a little better. But this is not going to, this is going to get covered up in the seam, I think, pretty well, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'll have to watch it though, because that's getting close to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to scooch that over, this piece over just a little bit, so I can make sure I've got a nice seam right there. And if it hangs over a little bit more on the outside, that's okay. All right, so making sure I still have everything else lined up. Yep. So like I said, all of us make mistakes. Nothing is perfect. I don't think I've ever made anything that I thought was perfect. And I like to tell the story of the Amish quilters who say that even if it looks perfect, they'll put an imperfection in because only God can do perfect things. So I think that's very true. Okay, so we've got that pinned. And the picture she's showing that is stacked. She just made a note so that you can see how they would line up. All right, so we're going to start sewing the back seam at the interfacing outer bag edge. So, okay. Sew the seam along the interfacing and outer bag edge until reaching the end of the interfacing. Back stitch. Okay, so what I'm going to do, what she's saying is, I think I'm going to actually sew mine from the other direction so I can see this problem that I created and handle it a little better. So what I'm going to do is we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam starting here. We're going to end right before we get to the interfacing, and we're going to leave a 5/8 inch opening right here, and then we're going to keep going and do a 1/4 inch seam. My 1/4 inch seam is going to be a 1/4 inch from the interfacing, not from that piece that's hanging over. Okay, hope that makes sense. If you want to mark it, which I think is not a bad idea, I'm going to go ahead and mark where to stop here. So I want to stop sewing there, and then I'm going to mark where the 5/8 inches would be. So there's a half, there's a 5/8 inches, and that's where I'm going to start again. That, I think, is a better way to keep that under control and get it the right distance. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the machine now and sew my 1/4 inch seam. And here we go. Stopping with the needle down. I hope everybody's still doing okay out there. Be sure to let us know if not. Okay, so I'm almost to my blue dot here, so I'm going to stop right there, and I am going to back stitch over that, and I'm going to take that off and use my scissors to cut. I've gotten so spoiled with these machines cutting my thread for me. It goes so much quicker too that I've gotten to the point where when I pick a machine to use, it has to have scissors on it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and lower my needle right into the mark where I'm going to start again, so that I've got that nailed, and I'm going to stitch a little ways, and then I'm going to do some back stitching. Now this machine, if I remember right, will still go back another, oh no, it went straight forward. That's good. Some of our machines will take a couple more stitches backwards when you take off the reverse, so that's something I'm learning to try to allow for. it can be a little disconcerting at first if you're not used to it. And I'm not back stitching at the bottom or the top because that's all going to be enclosed in other seams later. Okay, so got that done. And if you can see, it's going pretty quickly. All right, so next we are going to match the seam and center mark on the outer bag. Well, first of all, we're going to press this back seam open. Let's do that. So I just kind of put that seam in the middle so that I don't make creases where I don't want them. And open that up a little. Sometimes another little tool I want to show you real quick while we're doing this. Sorry. I like this little tool also, especially for things like this where I kind of need to get them open even a little bit before I start pressing, especially when you get down here into this interfacing area. Sometimes it can be a little bulky and a little hard to get in there and find exactly what you want to press. So that little roller really kind of helps do a good job of opening it up for you so you don't have to struggle quite so much. And I guess maybe if I turn this way you can see a little bit better. Just pressing open that seam. Okay, now it's time to read some more instructions, so bear with me for a minute. Okay, so we're going to match the seam and center mark on the outer bag and pin in place. So I think what she means is we made those marks, remember, for our center right here. So I'm going to match my seam with that blue center mark that I made earlier, and I'm going to pin that in place. Okay, and then I'm going to do that on the other side. So this one's a little harder to see because I've got blue on top of turquoise, but it's right there. So I'm going to line up my center seam there and pin it. Okay, and just kind of smooth that out because we are going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on each, on this side of the outer bag. So just the outer bag at this point. I did pin the other one, but we're going to do that in a minute because we're going to leave a gap. So this one goes all the way across. So we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam all the way across. Okay, and on this one I actually am going to do a little back stitching because I want to make sure that that goes all the way out to the edge and then back. And you can see my interfacing doesn't line up exactly, and I kind of got it crinkled up here. We'll fix that later, but that's okay. There's enough of a seam that there's not going to be a negative impact from that. I do want this to kind of straighten up a little. Well, if I can get my finger in there. There we go. Kind of smooth that out so I don't have an unwanted fold. Okay, and another back stitch just to keep everything in place and cut our thread. Now the next thing I'm going to do is we'll go back to the cutting table and I'm going to mark a 3-inch opening down here at the bottom. I like to mark these things because then I am less likely to go too far or too long. So it's going to be about 1.5 inches on each side of that seam. Yeah, too many things. I'm going to put a mark there, and then I'm going to put a mark at the 3-inch point over here. Okay, so what we're going to do for the bottom is sew from uh, the the edge to that first mark, and then from the second mark to the edge. That'll leave us an opening so we can turn it right side out. Otherwise we would not be able to see the outside of this thing. Oh, I don't really want to take that out yet. Okay. So another 1/4 inch seam and some back stitching until I get to my blue mark, and I am going to back stitch a little bit there. This just helps it keep it from coming out, the stitches from coming out when we turn it right side out. So that's why I back stitch in places like this. So I'm going to go forward first so I get it in the right spot, and then do a little back stitching just to kind of secure the stitches, and then go forward. On the Viking machines, you may have a fixed stitch, and the fixed stitch is also a really good option for there. I like to use that for those places where, so I don't have extra stitching in there, but it really doesn't make that much difference. Okay, so now we're going to make the box corners. So one of the nice things about this, and one of the things that makes it look professional, sort of, is that it has these nice boxed corners on the bottom. So that's what we're going to do next, is put together these corners. So we've got the bag laid flat, and we're going to use a ruler to mark the corners. I like this little ruler for this, but you can use a square ruler. She shows that in the picture. So at each of the 4 corners, mark a box 2 inches tall by 1 3/4 inches wide. So I'm going to do the 1 3/4 inches this way first. So I'm going to mark 1 3/4 right there. Do the same thing on this side. So I know where that is, 1 3/4. And then 2 inches tall. So we're going to go up from the bottom of the bag to 2 inches. And again, up from the bottom of the bag to 2 inches. And then I'm going to draw a square. So I'm going to connect those 2 lines. Like that. And the same thing over here. I'm going to connect my 2 lines. 2 inches tall by a 1 3/4 wide, or however she said it. I think that I say it probably the opposite, but we want 2 inches to be taller, and the 1 3/4 inches to be the wider. And we're going to do that on each of the 4 corners. So I'm going to do that down here too. 2 inches tall. And it's going to go in 1 3/4. And then I'm going to make my box. And the same thing on this side. 2 inches tall. 1 3/4 inches in. 3/4 right there. I'm going to go 2 and 2. And now the fun part, we get to cut it. Like I said, measure a bazillion times and then cut. So what we're going to do is take some scissors, and I prefer to do this with scissors, which I didn't get out, so I'm going to get that out of my handy tool case. Some of you have seen this tool case, but I think we'll probably do a class on how to make this at some point. It's really nice because it holds all of your sewing supplies, and since I travel I sew in 3 different places every week, it's very handy for me to have that all together. Okay, so take a deep breath and just cut those corners. I didn't even have to do the deep breath because I know it works. if you cut it right, I mean, if you mark it right, your cutting will be fine. Okay. Cut that corner. And we're going to cut that corner. Cutting is the other thing I do with my right hand, using scissors. I'm kind of confused when it comes to handedness most of the time. Okay, so that's what it should look like when you're done with that, okay? Now, what she wants you to do is place your fingers, okay, inside the cut of the box like this. And we're going to bring these corners together, these edges together, just like that. And pin those. And I'm going to open my seams so it's a little less bulky down here. And I'm going to pin that. And we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. So we're going to do that on all 4 corners. And she actually shows, she has a YouTube video on how to do this. If I'm too confusing, you could go watch hers and it might make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to line those edges up together and pin. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So put your fingers, if you need to, put your fingers in there in the gap and line those edges up like this. Try to open up my seam a little bit. There we go. And pin that. And probably 1 pin in the middle is good enough for me, but you can pin more if you want to. And I'm going to open that seam up. If you want to, you can press it open. But finger pressing is probably good enough for me. All right, because I'm going to sew that seam open. Okay, so we're going to go stitch that 1/4 inch seam on all of those corners. And you can use, one of the nice things about this is a technique you can use on bags, any kind of bag or box type thing you want to make. It's a really nice way to make some square corners, and it's pretty easy, really. Okay, so here comes my 1/4 inch seam and my pin. Get my hand out of the way there. And line that up. There's one. And I am going to reverse. I've sometimes had these seams come out, so I've learned that I do want those to stay secure. Okay, I'm going to do the other side. So there we go. This is where if you pinned more, you might be faster at this than I am. Okay, so do this side. Do a little back stitch. I had my foot control kind of had a pause in it there for a minute. I couldn't get it to go. All right, here we go. I'm sure it was operator error, usually is. Okay, and there we go. Back stitch here, just to make it secure. Okay, cut that. And then we'll do the other side. And do my reverse. Go back forward. Kind of open this seam up as I go here. And do a back, whoa, come on, do the back stitch. Okay. And I've got one more to do. And this is going pretty quickly. May not be as hard. I hope you're finding it's not as hard as you thought it might be to make. It's just challenging enough to be interesting, is the way I look at it, but not so hard that I get frustrated trying to make them. But I do have to read the instructions. So hopefully, with me helping by reading the instructions and showing you how this goes, it'll be a little easier. Okay, so those are our box corners. I'm going to trim a few threads here while I'm by my thread catcher. There we go. Okay. And back to the instructions. Okay, so now we can turn the bag inside out. So what I'm going to do, we've got this tiny little 3-inch hole here, right? So I'm going to kind of pull one corner through to get it started, and then just work it carefully through that hole. This is why I did the back stitching around that hole, is because I've had it come out quite a bit if I don't do that. And you need those seams to be nice and secure. So look, it's fun. I'm gonna get it turned inside out. And it takes a little bit of work, but you can get your corners open. I have another nice tool that I like to use for this kind of thing. It's the Clover makes this Hera marker, is what they call it. I don't know what that means. I should look it up someday. But you can use either end to do curves or points, and it just really helps you get nice gets your points turned out nicely and completely, I guess is a way to say it. That wasn't the words I was looking for, but that's what came out. Okay, now we're going to push the inner bag inside and kind of tuck those corners in. And that's going to form this 5/8 inch cuff up here at the top. So that's why the lining was bigger than the top. Now, I actually, before I do that, I like to come in here and close up this seam. I don't think there's any reason. I think that's what I've done. Pin all around the cuff. Yeah. I don't like to do this by hand, and since it's on the inside, I'm just going to go ahead and stitch this 3-inch opening closed. You can see, I guess I didn't do a good enough job of back stitching there. Wow. So I'm just going to pin that, or not pin that, stitch that closed. You can do it by hand if you want, but I'm just going to throw this in here because, like I said, it's in the bottom of the bag and there's going to be thread and trash in there most of the time. So I'm not worried about how it looks. And this way it's done a little more quickly for me. So just kind of tuck in those 1/4 inch seams and stitch close to the edge. And it's not going to be pretty because I'm in a hurry, but you don't have to be. You can make it look nicer than this. This one is going to be one that I'm going to have at home, so I'm not going to have anybody else looking at it and judging me. When I have samples for the store that I do, we try to make sure they are well done so that we don't hear about it from our customers. Sometimes you guys are pretty good critics. I didn't backstitch here, so I'm going to make this a little more secure. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to trim those threads. And now I can tuck this down inside my bag. And see, nobody's ever going to know. You can't really tell the difference. So that's what I do with that inside lining. Okay, now, we're going to make a casing. So we're going to pin all around the cuff to make sure that the bag lining lays over snugly, but we don't want to fold the interfacing over. So in other words, you don't want to bend that interfacing down. We're just going to make sure that it's nice and even. And she says to pin all around it. I'm not going to, but we're going to make a casing now for the boning that's going to go in here. You see how nice and firm, or I guess you can see it over here. Nice and firmly this stays open. The boning is what helps it do that, and so we're going to make a casing that will hold the boning in place. So we want to make a mark just above the trim stitch, 3/4 of an inch from the center seam there. So I'm going to get my handy dandy ruler and marker. This is a water soluble marker, so it will go away someday. I can spritz it out. I probably won't ever wash this, but we can spritz it out later. So if I don't want it to show. So I'm going to mark that, and then another one over here, 3/4 of an inch from that seam. And that's so I know where to start and stop. And beginning at the mark on the right side of the cuff. Let's see, what is she saying? I'm going to read here for a minute, okay? Beginning at the mark, by the way, I'm on page 8, step 11, if you're following along. Beginning at the mark to the right side of the back seam, top stitch around the cuff on the lining fabric, sewing very close to the trim stitch. So I'm going to be sewing right about along there. It's important that this top stitching be very close to the trim stitch, otherwise the boning won't slide through easily. So we need to have it wide enough so that the boning will go through. And she makes a note that this is easier to do if you use the free arm of your machine. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to set my machine up that way. And on most of our machines, all you have to do is pull this piece off and set it aside, which is very nice. Makes it easy. Just kind of going to make sure I've got that looking the way I want it. Okay, and then I'm going to slide this under around the free arm, and I'm going to stitch. I've got my mark there. I'm going to stitch really, really close to the trim, if not on the trim. So almost on the trim, but not quite. And again, I'm going to do a slight back stitch here, just a couple of back stitches, and then go forward. And you kind of have to manipulate the bag just a little bit as you go to get a flat surface to sew on. And so here's where my contrasting thread, if you wanted to match it, you could, but I don't mind having the contrasting thread, so I kind of like that. And again, I'm not sewing straight, so oh well. What I do to try to get something narrow like this is I pick a spot on my foot that I look at and line the fabric up with that spot. I don't look at my needle. I find that if I look at my needle, I go crooked more than if I look at the spot where I want to line the fabric up. So my straight stitching has gotten better since I started doing that. But I still look away sometimes, or I'm not paying attention, and don't always go completely straight. Okay, and then I'm going to sew up to this next mark again and do a couple of back stitches and cut my thread. Okay, and I'm going to trim those threads. And we're getting closer to having our bag. It's kind of looking good. All right, so back over here to the cutting table, and we're going to go on to page 9, it looks like, and we're going to put in, we're not putting in the boning yet. We're going to attach the scissors tab, so it's going to go on here. So we're going to take the 2.5, it was 2 1/4 by 2 inch piece of your lining fabric. Now, if you want to, you could actually make this a contrasting piece so you can see it better. What we're going to do is press the 2-inch sides in about 1/4 inch. So get the 2-inch sides. Okay, we're going to press the longer sides in about 1/4 inch. Oh, another tool I didn't get out, but this is awesome for situations like this where you need to press and measure at the same time. I love this tool. I've got a 1/4 inch line here. So I'm going to line my ruler up where I can see this. This is a heat and press, I think it's what it's called, something heat and press tool, but it's nice because it's fuzzy and you can see it sticks to my fabric so my fabric doesn't slip around, and I can just fold that over and press it down. Wake up, iron. I know you sat there for 10 minutes or more. So I'm going to press that right on top of the measuring thingy. My wonderful terminology there. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and you can see it just kind of sticks to my fabric, which is really nice. And I can measure and make sure I've got the right width that I'm pressing over, and you can just press right on top of the ruler. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Okay, now we're going to fold the piece in half lengthwise this way, wrong sides together. That's important. And wrong sides together. Then we're going to fold the outer raw edges into the center. No, I got to read that again. Sorry, guys. Press the 2 inches in then fold the piece in half lengthwise. Oh, the other way. This is what she means. Fold it in half this way. Okay. With the wrong sides together. Then fold the outer raw edges to the center fold. Wrong sides together. I did right sides together. It kind of matters. All right. So there we go. I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to press that. I think I got it now. We're going to press that and make a crease. Now I understand what she's saying. I've made these. I've made a bunch of these before, but you know what? It was before yesterday, so I haven't made one since yesterday. So now what we're going to do is I've got a crease, and we're going to fold the raw edge in of each side into that crease. And do the same thing on the other side. Like that. I know I've got to get my iron out of the way, I think. Try to do this way. Press that, and then we're going to take that piece and fold it in half again so all the raw edges are inside, encased. Press it one more time. Nice and thick, but if you've got one of our machines, it's going to go through it, no problem. Okay, and then what we're going to do is top stitch all the way around the edges of this piece. So I'm going to actually put my tray back on so I have a little bit more of a work surface and get into top stitch mode here. So I'm going to line this up. And on this, something like this where the edges are going to be thicker because I've got all those folds, I like to start kind of in the middle and work my way around. That way I don't have to fight those edges quite so much. I'm going to go one more stitch. Sometimes I use the hand wheel so that I only get one more stitch when that's what I want. And some of you have tools that you use for this. I tend to use my tweezers for anything where I need to get my fingers in and help it along a little bit. There we go. Okay, and we're going to top stitch this edge. I got a little too close. Nope, I guess it's fine. And mine's not going to be perfect again. There we go. And one last turn and I can go down the center. I'm probably going to fix that seam here. I think it didn't turn out the way I wanted it quite. Let's see. Yeah, I kind of didn't catch that last edge. So I'm just going to start, now that it's kind of smushed down by the machine, I'm just going to start on the corner. There we go. And make sure that that's nice and straight. And cut my thread, trim all those extra threads off. And we've got the little scissor tab. Sorry, I know my big fat fingers are in the way, but you get the idea. Okay. Get those threads. I didn't get them in my thread catcher, but we also have vacuums here. So, okay, now we are going to take this scissor tab and center it on the back seam, so that seam that goes down the back of the thread catcher, and 1.25 inches below the top of the bag. So I'm going to measure my 1.25 inches, and I'm going to put that little guy right there, and I'm going to get a pin and pin it in place. I'm probably going to need to take, maybe not. I don't think I need to put make my free arm available there. So that's where I've got an inch and a half down, or 1.25 inches down from the top, and I place the little tab right there. Now what we're going to do is just sew where we stitched before, right here, just on the short ends, okay? So I'm going to go stitch that down. And you may not be able to see this very well. I'll try to pull it back out of the way. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this side down first, right on top of the previous stitching. And because this will get some use, I'm actually going to go over it quite a bit, maybe 3 times like that, so that it's strongly attached and won't come off later, I hope. And now I'm going to stitch the other side down. Okay, and I'm going to back stitch over it, and I'm going to stitch it one more time. Okay. Once I've got that, I'm also going to trim those threads. Again, excuse my fat fingers and my Thanksgiving Day burn. I was putting the sweet potatoes in the oven and turned around to say something to Patrick, and the next thing I knew, I had a burn. Okay. So there we go. Now we've got the little scissor holder, or even, you know, your tweezers. I'm using my tweezers a lot. You can put whatever tool in there that you think you're going to use the most, depending on what you're doing. Okay, so now we get to insert the boning, which is going to make this top of the bag more steady, secure. So this is your boning piece, and I'm going to pull she's got a piece of paper, sticky paper wrapped around it. And one of the things that you're going to do is, the end is really square, and I think my little scissors will work. I'm just going to kind of curve this off, and yeah. Make a curve out of that so I don't have pointy edges. And then there's a little hole back here. Remember, we made this casing, and you're just going to push that in. The nice thing about the boning is it's really firm, and it's going to be bigger, at least if I remember right. It ends up being a little bit bigger than your bag top, and you don't want to cut it. If it is, what you want to do is, if I can get the other piece to come out, there it is. So my other piece here is coming out. I want to get it so that it's coming through, not getting caught in that seam. And I'm going to just let it overlap into the casing. So I think I'll push it back a little if I can. This takes a little bit of work, but it actually holds better if you can do this. Get it into... Okay, you may need to cut it a little bit just to get it in there, but I'm just going to curve the other side. There we go. Now I got it in there, and that's it. Look at how nicely that stands up. It's got the nice little flat bottom, and the boning just really gives it some shape there. I don't think I'd ever used boning before. Thank goodness we don't wear corsets anymore before making this project, but it's really handy for this. Okay. Okay, that's all about putting the boning in. So we're going to go on to page 10, where we're going to make the hanging tab and cover the ceramic tile. So look, we got the bag. All we've got to do is the hanging tile and the ceramic tile, and then make the pincushion. I'm just checking the time. I think we'll go ahead with that. It's about 11:15 by my clock. So we're going to take a little lunch break a little bit later, but we can keep going for a while. Okay, so what we're going to do is take that piece that was that we cut earlier for the hanging tab, and this is for the ceramic tile cover. So it's this piece that is 2 3/4 by 5 inches, and we are going to sew a seam with the right sides together. We're going to sew a seam along the short end of the tab. So again, that's just a 1/4 inch seam. So we'll go do that. And I'm not worried about back stitching on this part because it's going to get caught in some other seams. Okay. So we're going to finger press that seam open. Instead of finger pressing, I think what I'm going to do is take my little rolly tool. I know there's a name for it, but I call it the rolly tool. And I'm going to just roll that along that seam. It does a little bit better job than finger pressing it. If I were to take it to the iron and press it, of course, you know, we'd end up with creases over here, which we really don't want. Then we're going to turn this right side out. And we are going to press it now with the seam running down the middle. And we're going to get creases in this side. So like this. Okay, that's the hanging tab. I'm going to turn on to page 11. Now we're going to take one piece of the ceramic tile cover fabric. So again, these are 4 by 7 inches, if I remember right. Yep, got the right piece. And we're going to put the ceramic tile down the center. Oh wait, we're going to take one size up. We're going to go look for our batting. Sorry, my words are losing me at the moment. Okay, we're going to take one piece of the ceramic tile cover, and we're going to find the piece of batting that is the same size, which is 4 by 7, which is the smaller one. And I'm going to lay the fabric over the batting. And we're going to put the hanging loop along the edge and stitch this down. with 1/4 of an inch. We're going to center it there. Edge stick the hook. Oh, wait, sorry. I missed the hook and loop tape. You know, Velcro. We're going to take the hook side. So if you don't know the difference, the hook side is the one with the stiff loops on it. The loop side is the side with the loops on it. The hook side is the soft side. So we're going to take the hook side, which is the soft side, hook side, okay, and put that lengthwise down the center and just edge stitch around it. Okay, sorry, I almost missed a step there. Okay, here we go. And I didn't measure to find the center, I just kind of eyeballed it. It really doesn't matter because sometimes you'll get it straight on and sometimes when you're putting them together, sometimes you won't. And that's okay. They'll still stick together. It's a nice long piece. Okay, so I am going to back stitch there. And I think, you know, this could come up when you keep pulling it open or taking it off and putting it back on, it could come up. So I'm going to do a little bit of extra back stitching there just to keep it secure. And trim those threads. Back ones don't matter. Okay, now we're going to come back up for here. And we are going to center and pin the hanging tab, which is this thing that we just sewed. So I'm just going to fold like this to one side of the top ceramic tile cover. Up. So this is the top, the bottom. Yep, this is the top. Okay, this is still the top. So I'm going to find the center of that. And then we're going to put the other piece on top. Okay, so I'm going to put this on with the seam up. And then put this right sides together on top of those two things. And we're going to stitch around there. I'm going to pin the hanging tab first so it doesn't lose its spot. And we're going to do 1/4 inch seam, but we're going to leave an opening on the opposite side here so that we can turn it right side out. Sorry, reading and talking at the same time, I don't do very well. Okay, so put a few pins in this to hold it all together. And I'm going to start on the opposite side so I can start my opening, go all the way around, and stop before I get to to where I started. So we can turn it right side out. Okay. So right about there, I guess, and do our 1/4 inch seam. One thing I've noticed on this foot that I really like is if I get my seam lined up with this line on the foot, I can turn and I've got it lined up perfectly for the next side, or close to perfectly. So again, I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric with that line on the foot. You may not have that line on your foot, and that's okay. Just make a nice neat corner there if you can. Take my pins out as I go. Turn the corner, and I'm going to stop right about there and do my back stitch. Well, maybe not. I think I still have room to turn it, so. Okay, and now let me see what she has to say about turning. Turn the cover right side out. One thing that I like to do that she doesn't mention here, I'm going to trim my corners just a little bit, not a bunch, but it just, I think, makes for a neater corner. So I just take my little scissors and do a diagonal cut across the corner to get some of that bulk out of there. And then we're going to turn it right side out. And again, it'll take a little bit of work. There's my hanging tab. Okay, and again, I like this tool for pushing out my corners. Just does a better job than my fingers. You want to be careful you don't push too hard and push through the seam, but have done that. But you sort of learn after that kind of how hard you can push without making a hole in the corner. So I'm going to come over here and do the other side. Get that corner turned out nicely. And one more. Okay. So that's the beginnings of our hanging tab. At this point, you'll want to check, insert the tile into the opening. I'm not sure I left enough room, actually. I'm going to have to open mine up a little bit because, ooh, it's the first time the seam rippers come out. We're doing pretty well. I'm going to open this back up a little bit because I need to be able to get that ceramic tile in there. So a little bit on each side. So much for those back stitches, but that's okay. And let's see if I've got enough to fit the tile in there. So this tile gives your thread catcher base enough weight that it won't fall off the, boy, I'm gonna have to trim quite a bit. So you wanna leave a pretty good opening on that side. So a little bit more ripping. But it looks like it's a good fit other than that. So I don't want to go all the way to the corners, but fairly close. I forgot that I had to stick a tile in there. Okay, so here we go. Let's check and see if it fits, if I can get it on there. I know it's possible, I've done it. Kind of have to stretch your fabric a little to get it over there. There we go. And again, we're just checking for fit. There, it worked. It fits, okay? So we're gonna take the tile out for now. We'll finish that part, the tile cover, a little bit later. So take it back off. Okay, take it back out anyway. Okay, now, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make a mark on the hanging tab. So on the hanging tab with the seam side up, so that's this side, get all my pieces out of the way. We're going to measure it 2 inches from where the tab meets the tile cover, so like this. I'm going to go right on that seam where the tab comes up to the tile cover, and we're going to draw a line. This is the line that we're going to use to sew it to the thread catcher part. So get it over here. And then I'm just going to add a straight line all the way across, like that. Okay. So we're going to use this to attach it to the bag. So on the inside edge of the bag rim, pin the hanging tab seam side up. So we're going to keep going with this seam side up so that the marked sewing line is in line with the casing top stitching. So in other words, I'm going to line this marked line up with where I did my top stitching right here on the casing. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of put the tile cover inside the bag, line that up, and I'm also going to line up the seams so that they're together on top of each other, I guess I should say. And I'm going to pin that. And you can see I've got my line. I hope you can see I've got my line lined up with that stitching. And we're going to go to the machine and sew right along that line. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to start just a little bit away from the hanging tab and sew onto it so I get the complete edge. Do a little back stitch again. And then come back forward. I'm going to go ahead and get my pin out of there. And a little bit more back stitching to hold it in place. Cut my threads. Okay, and I'm going to trim that. And trim those threads. Oops, yeah. Trim whatever. Whatever you see. Okay. And we're going to turn the page now to page 12 if you're following along. And I'm going to take that tile cover back out. So you see now it's nicely attached. And for those of you who were worried about that raw edge seam, you'll never see it. So it's always going to be covered up by this tab. Now we're going to take the tile and put it back in to the cover. I guess this side will work a little better. I'm even going to rip out some more. It looks like she didn't even sew around the corners on that, so I may not have read carefully enough, but I'm going to rip a few more stitches out over here to make it a little easier. And then, never fear, we're going to glue it together. So you don't have to sew anything right here. The first time I made one of these, I got to this point and I was like, how am I ever going to get that together? Well, it wasn't that bad. We used glue. And again, you just kind of have to force it in there. There we go. Got it in. Now, what you want to do is fold up your edges kind of like a package, and I'm going to turn the top one under a little bit so I don't have that raw edge there, and I'm going to put my glue along this side. So I like to use Aleene's tacky glue. This one's a little bit empty, so I'm going to have to squeeze. Or it's getting close to the empty stage, so I'm going to have to squeeze a bit. So just run a bead of glue along. Mine's not even right on top of my tile yet, but I get the idea. And put that over the edge, wrap that around the tile, and then I'm going to take this other one. This is where it's going to get messy, so we'll probably take a break after this to let the glue dry, and so I can go wash my hands because I don't like sticky. And I don't want to get glue all over my machine either. So I'm going to fold that over as neatly as I can, which isn't all that neatly at the moment, but you get the idea. You can kind of, the nice thing about this glue is you can kind of mess with it a little bit after you get it on there. before it sets and dries. Come on, raw edge, disappear for me. Okay, I think that's good enough for me for now. So that again won't show very often because usually it's going to be to the back of your table. So there we are. We've got the base of the thread catcher done. We're going to take about 30-minute break, and when we come back, we're going to make the pin cushion and the little posy to go on top, and then hey, we'll be done. And it's not taking nearly as long as I thought it might. So that's good. Have a nice little break, and I'll be talking with you again soon. Okay, welcome back everybody. We've really made some great progress this morning. I just want to check and see if anybody has any questions. I didn't see any in the chat window, but if you do have one, maybe now would be a good time to ask. I'm going to wait just a minute in case somebody's trying to type. Okay. So we'll keep an eye on that, and if any questions come up, I'll do my best to answer them. Okay? Also, feel free to get a hold of me afterwards. You can send me email, or I gave you all my cell phone number, so don't abuse it. But you can, don't send me a text or a call at midnight because I won't be up and I won't answer then. But pretty much any time during the day unless I'm teaching. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we're on page 12 of the instructions of the pattern. I should note also, we glued this closed. You could also hand sew that closed if you wanted to, if you want to make it look a little bit neater, but I'm actually, even though I did it pretty quickly, I'm actually kind of happy with that. So I think it turned out okay. And my glue's pretty much set. Okay, so now we're going to make the pincushion. So the first thing you want to do is take the piece of fabric that you cut for the bottom of the pincushion, and we're going to take the what they call it, loop side of the hook and loop tape and put it down the middle and go stitch that down. And then I'm going to make sure I tack this down well along the last side so it doesn't come off. Do a little back stitch. Okay. I'm going to trim that. Okay. And then we're going to go back over to the cutting table, or I am. All right, so the next thing you want to do is I've laid out the 7 pieces for the top here on the cutting mat in the way that I want them to look. And I'm going to start sewing those together. We're going to do 1/4 inch seams. So you sew all of those together, and then I will meet you back over here. So I'm going to go do a little bit of piecing. Okay. So first 2 pieces together, if I can grab just those 2. Still not seeing any questions, so that's a good thing, I guess. Hopefully everything's been fairly clear up till now. And we're just going to do a 1/4 inch seam on these little strips. And I'm going to take my next piece and put it right sides together with the last one. Most of you, if you're quilters, you know what I'm doing here, so I probably don't have to explain a lot, but I just will try to talk to fill up the fill up the vacuum. I put up my Christmas tree last week, and I guess I'm getting older because it took just about everything I had out of me that day. I was pretty sore the next day. I managed to went looking for an artificial tree this year. I really prefer the live ones, the real ones, because of the smell and all that, but they're also a little bit more work, and it's harder for me to put those up by myself. So I bought an artificial one. I wanted to get one that was kind of skinny, but it ended up being 7.5 feet tall. So I was up and down the ladder all the time trying to decorate it. So that my knees weren't real happy with me after that, which means I think I need to start doing some more exercise. Okay. I spend too much time at the sewing machine and not enough time being active, I think. So we're getting close here. I've got, looks like 5 of them sewn together. Got 2 more. Here's this one. A little more of that lime green. The pink kitty cat may go away soon. If you've seen my car, you know that in addition to the lime green, I have a pink cat on the back. That was Patrick's idea. But it's starting to wear out. It's vinyl, I think, and it's starting to go. So the kitty cat may come off one of these days. And the last piece. Okay. Now I'm going to take this over to the iron, and we're going to press all the seams in one direction. And I did try to warm up my iron before we got started again. So I just kind of start on one end and go across if I can. Sometimes it's hard to get, I'm having trouble getting that first one done. There we go. Okay, once you get that going, then you can just press them all in the same direction. And then I always check to see what it looks like on the front, and I got that one kind of, didn't get that quite straight in terms of folding or opening it up after stitching, opening that seam up. It wasn't quite straight, but that looks pretty good. I'm happy enough with that. Okay, so the next step is we're going to trim this to the same size as the back, which is 7.5 by 4.5, if it's not that size already. So I'm going to get my rotary cutter and my ruler. Now let's see where we are here. So I need it to be 7.5 by 4.25. I said 4.5, but it's 4.25. So there's 7.5. I'm going to move this over to, I'm actually going to go from this side because I think it's a little straighter. And I'm going to go to 4.25 and trim that side first. So I did need to trim a little. And I'm going to turn it around this way and trim it to 7.5. And it is just slightly more than 7.5. So I'm actually going to trim a tiny bit off at this end so it's a little more balanced. Oops, already starting to use the one I just made, thread catcher I just made. All right, 7.5 is going to be there. And so just have a little bit to trim off of that side. Okay. Now, we're going to put the pincushion top onto the bigger piece of batting that we had left over. So this is that second piece of batting, and we're going to layer that top on top of it. I'm going to kind of spread it out. There we go. And then layer the pincushion back, right sides together on top of it. And let's see how much of a hole. She said to leave about 1.5 inches on one of the short sides, actually. So we're going to do that over here. So I'm going to start right about 1 inch, 1/2 inch to 1 inch from one corner and go around. And then we get to fill it. So starting right about there. Again, I'm going to try back stitching. Whoa. Come on. And sew down the long side. And sew all the way down the second short side. And now all the way down this other long side. Just kind of straighten that out a little bit. Go to the corner and turn and back stitch. So I'm going to leave enough room so that we can turn it right side out. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to take my scissors and trim those corners so they're not quite so bulky, especially with that batting in there. I think it makes a difference. Okay. And guess what? We're going to turn it inside out, or right side out. Maybe. There. Okay. So get this little puppy turned. Maybe. There we go. Got it started. I think getting them started is the hardest part. And then once you've got it turned out, you can kind of push it from the other side. Like that. And then of course I'm going to get my handy dandy tool out to poke my corners. We all end up finding, I think, our favorite tools for this kind of thing. And I've really grown to like this one. It doesn't, I've had others that I've broken the tool and, you know, this one just works pretty well for me. So get that other corner. And now we get to play with walnut shells. So in your kit, there is a bag of ground walnut shells, and they're kind of messy. So that's why if you have a funnel at home, I'd recommend using that. If not, you can kind of make one like this. And yeah, it's kind of a balance. You got to find, you want to fill it up well enough that the pins will stay in and it's not floppy, but you don't want to overfill it because then it's hard to put the pins in. So just kind of, this is actually pretty well filled. It's not packed real tight, but the pins stay, it keeps its shape pretty well. So we'll see how much of that, if I can get close to that. All right, and in this case, I was just checking to see how we close that. We are going to do a blind stitch. So I've got my handy dandy needles. I put my needles in the posy so I can kind of keep track of them. So I've got a couple of hand needles there. And we'll see if I can do this without getting it everywhere. My guess is probably not, but we'll try. Well, so far so good. So as you go up, it'll start to get to the point where you can kind of let it stand on its own. Get in there. Ooh, that may be good, well, not quite good enough, so I'm going to put some more in. I'm about that close to the top, so I'm at kind of one of those strips from the top, and I don't like them that loose. Stay. So we'll see. You really kind of need 3 hands for this job, but I think we can do it. Oop. And she sends you plenty. I like that in the kit she sends you plenty of walnut shells, so you don't have to I almost always have a few left over, so I hang on to them. I make enough of these that I hang on to them until I have enough that I can make a whole nother pincushion with them. Okay, we're getting there. I'm thinking that's probably about as full as I'm going to get it without really making a total mess. So I'm not going to make you watch me hand sew this together. I'll do it later. I think I can show you how to finish this without doing that. So I'm just going to pin it shut for right now and try to keep it from spilling. So then all you want to do at this point is just slip stitch that edge shut. And if you don't hand sew, you can also just take it to your machine and stitch across that edge. Okay, so there's the pincushion. Now we're going to make the posy. You don't have to make the posy, it's up to you. The first one I made, I didn't make it. Or you can use purchased flowers or decorate them really any way you want to, or not. But we're going to make the posy since it's part of the pattern. And this is where we're going to take the two pieces of 5.5 by the two 5.5 inch squares. And in your kit, there's also a piece of heat and bond. So what we're going to do is iron that heat and bond onto the back of one piece of fabric. Now, usually I use a Teflon pressing sheet for this so that I don't get my heat and bond on my pressing surface, but I didn't bring it over here today, so we'll do without. This poor old pressing mat's kind of done for anyway, so I'm just going to press that for a few seconds. I leave the steam on. It's up to you. You can turn it off if you want to. So I'm sure most of you have worked with this product before. We carry Steam-A-Seam 2 instead of heat and bond, but you press one side onto one piece of fabric, let it cool enough so that you can handle it, and so that the glue has a little time to set. And then what you'll do is take one of your corners and pull the paper away from the fabric like that, and you may be able to see it's kind of a shiny surface on it. That's a fusible that has made this into a fusible piece of fabric. So I'm going to get my other piece and I'm going to put them wrong sides together. I'm going to put the sticky side to the other side because you don't want to stick it permanently to your ironing surface. And press that down again. So now you've got a double-sided piece of fabric. I use this a lot for applique too, so very nice. Okay, now in the instructions she says we're going to draw 4 circles on this fabric. She says that you can use a vitamin bottle lid, but I got to looking at it and my scissor holder is just the right size for that, so I'm going to use it to draw my circles. So bear with me for a minute while I draw 4 circles. I think maybe too hot or too steamy there for my pen. I think I got it. Yep, good enough to see. There's another one. And a third one. Whew, almost to the edge there, but I think it'll be all right. Could have moved it up a little. And the last one. Okay, so here's another tool that I don't use very often, but pinking shears I don't use very much anymore. I remember I guess when I made garments I used them a lot. I still do make garments, but I don't seem to feel like I need to use the pinking shears that much. So I'm going to grab those, and they just make a nice kind of ruffly edge along your flower, your posy. So I'm just going to cut all these circles out with the pinking shears. Let's get some, yeah, may not be quite round, but that's okay. Because I had it too close to the edge and I wanted to get that one last piece pinked. So I think part of the reason I stopped using pinking shears very much is, boy, they make your hands work. There's two. Three. I guess you can count as well as I can, but it's kind of nice to have a sense of accomplishment when you finish one. All right, and I'm almost done. There's the last one. Okay. Now, we're going to fold each circle in half with the color that you want to be showing, the main color you want to be showing on the outside. And then you're going to fold one more piece like that, I believe. Wait, yeah, we're going to fold it in half. I remember now. Took me a minute, but okay. So I'm going to make a crease in the center where I can see it. And then what we're going to do is fold one side up to the center and the other side up to the center. Now I got to see what she's going to have us do next. Pin that in place. Honestly, I didn't bring my Wonder Clips with me, but Wonder Clips would be a perfect thing. Just clip it on there, but I didn't do that, so I brought pins. Let's see if I can. I guess I need to pin it. Okay, I'll pin it. Maybe. Those pins may be not strong enough. Boy. Okay, maybe not. We'll get somewhere here. I'll put a pin on each side and we'll do it that way. Try not to poke myself. Okay, there's one. And we're going to do the same thing with the other three. So fold it in half. Fold it in half again to get a crease. And then open it back up and fold one half in and the other half into the center crease there. And pin. Get in there. Okay, there's the second one. And you get the idea. But you get to watch me do all four. That's what it's all about. Okay, fold it to the center. And fold that in. And fold that end in. Stick a pin in each side. Let's see, I've got another heavier duty one here. I may just wait and fold the last one at the machine. We'll see. Okay. Nope, I'm going to have to, and what we're going to end up doing when I get to the machine is we're going to line these up and we're going to stitch the points of all four of them together so that they make a little posy. So let me get the last one together. Fold that side in and the last side in. And I think I'll just take this one to the machine and start with it. So we're going to sew about 1/4 of an inch from the points. And this takes a little bit of finagling, so you may have to work at it a bit. But over to the machine now. And right about 1/4 of an inch from the point, I'm going to stitch that one down. And then I'm going to take the next one and stick it right up next to that one. And then as I go in, I'm going to start turning it so that I keep 1/4 of an inch away from that point, roughly. Okay. Take the pins out of these. Line the next one up with the center. And just keep turning. And if I remember right, I went around these a couple of times because felt like it needed a little bit more than one time around. Okay, here's the 4th one. Yeah, so they kind of float around a little bit, so I'm gonna stitch around a couple of times more, just to make sure they're all stitched together and they'll stay that way. And this is the nice thing about having a powerful machine, is that you don't have to break needles and get sad or frustrated. It just goes right through all those layers. So what I'm doing is kind of going closer in towards the points each time I go around. I'm going to do one more round. Whoops, I went a little too far out on that one. Well, we can get back in toward the center pretty easily. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to do a little back stitch, so hopefully it'll stick or stay. And that's all there is to the posy, except I'm going to trim my thread. I forgot to look for a button or some fun little thing to put in the center of this one. So what we're going to do is glue it onto the pincushion, and then you can put whatever you want to in the center there. So where's my pincushion? Make sure there's nothing else. Yep, so your choice of button to the center of the posy. You're going to hand stitch the bottom of the bag. You could have done that. I sewed it. And then the other thing we're going to do is glue this shelf liner to the bottom of the holder of the ceramic tile. So that's roughly what it's going to look like when it's done. Okay? If you guys have any questions, please be sure to let me know. Now that I'm looking at that, actually, I think I may take some of those walnut shells out because it's pretty thick. I got it a little too thick, a little bit thicker than this. So I'm going to take a few walnut shells, sew this up, glue this on, glue something else on top of that, and we're good to go. All right? Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Happy sewing.